Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 376 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to upgrade our glass setup, as well as see the factory hit 50 gigawatts of power consumption. Enjoy. So as far as our glass, we are making a lot of it, and sodium hydroxide has caught up, so that's not an issue anymore. However, we're just not making it fast enough, so the way that we chose for this setup was the infinite glass recipe, which uses lime, wash sand, sodium carbonate, and sodium sulfate. And what's notable about that recipe is that all four of those ingredients are unlimited resources. They could be made from renewables and have no input of ores or stone or anything like that, which on one hand is great, but the problem with doing glass in this way is that it doesn't scale very well. So let's do a sample plan here. Our goal is glass, doing it in the best way, and let's say we wanted 300 a second, which is basically what we're looking for. It will require a bunch of molten glass, and then the glass mixture is what determines the input. And you can see we would need 60 of each input item. Now the lime and the wash sand is pretty easy. The hard thing is the sodium carbonate, which either comes from sodium or it has to be grown from brown algae. And then the sodium sulfate, which comes from sodium hydroxide and sulfuric acid. And it's actually a lot. That if we did it at this rate, we would not be able to pipe that amount of sulfuric acid in. And we would also need 120 sodium hydroxide a second. So that's pretty crazy. And another problem with our current setup is that either it was an oversight on my part or the mods changed, but these casting machines are using speed modules and not productivity modules. And they very well can use productivity modules. Probably shouldn't have done that because now the modules are messed up. I'm not terribly sure why I didn't put productivities in there, but they're not in there, and that would certainly help drop down the input requirements. Of course, we'll need even more machines that, even as it is, we need 40 of them. So if we stack them with productivities, now we need 90. But it does cut the input resources down by half. But even after we do that, it's still too much. And that's kind of the problem with this final recipe, is that yes, it's infinite, and it's convenient in the sense where it doesn't pull away your ores, but it's a real heavy load on things that are not very easy for you to make a lot of. So I don't think that is the recipe we should do. So then we need to look at the other recipes. Now all four recipes take 4 seconds, but every tier produces one more glass mixture in that 4 seconds. So strictly speaking, the number of machines you'll need is reduced the higher up you go. But the first stage is just silicon. The second is silicon and lime, which is great because lime is an infinite resource and it's easy to make. So now only half of your input is silicon. And then the third one is alumina and silicon and lime. So on one hand, it goes from 50% ore to 66% ore, which seems kind of bad, but the alumina that is added is of course a component of aluminum. And the thing about aluminum is that our factory is not very stressed on it. You see it is running, but it's not really running all that hard. Most of our aluminum goes into either low density structure or it goes into our giant research setup. But we only need 19 coils a second, which means in general, there will be some aluminum available to be mixed in with glass. At least it's a lot better than silicon, because silicon is quite stressed, making silicon nitride, and also just circuit components in general, but it's basically silicon nitride. So not having to use as much silicon and spreading the load over to aluminum sounds pretty smart. This third recipe seems like a good one. And they can't use productivities or anything. And are these numbers reasonable? This does require silicon ore, not the silicon ingots, which is a little problematic because this glass setup would end up using half of our factory's input of silicon. But also, this is a huge amount of glass, so it makes sense. But as you can see, it's not running all the time, so it clearly has room for a greater load. And of course, lime is easy. So we need to look at this setup and figure out what we want to do. This is going to be 4 green belts of glass. So we need to, at most, crunch it down into 4 individual setups. So if we put 2 speed modules into the induction furnace, it gets it below 4. So there could be one induction furnace per group of casting machines. And the powder mixers actually do have a higher tier. And speed modules, unfortunately, will not get it down to 2 per setup. So let's take one out, which will still have us with 3 per setup, and then we can use a pollution module. And that gets this much setup, and now the input resources are small enough that they could just be delivered on normal belts. Each setup will require tin, but it is a closed loop. So if we process the molten tin, we can just make it go away. And we have 4 setups, so we'll shrink this down to 1 machine per setup. It needs quite a bit of nitrogen gas. I'm not sure if that will be enough to fit on the network or not, or even where the setup will be. But also nitrogen is really easy to make, so if we need to make it, we can. We will certainly want to make the lime locally. We don't need to worry about this being linked to these other setups because the number is so small. So we'll just put it on a belt, and however many machines is how many we have. And limestone is an easy thing that can come from anywhere. So then we're left with this. And now we need to figure out where in the factory is this going to go. And it's important to recognize that of the input resources, and take out lime because that can be made locally, it only needs 36 silicon and 36 alumina to make 300 glass. So it's 5 times more compressed to make this glass very close to where it's needed, rather than to make it far away and then send it up. Essentially, one green belt could deliver both the alumina and the silicon we need, even without any sort of train or drones, if that's how we wanted to do it. And it's kind of funny, some of the icons are still a little wrong. Where on this machine, that's the old alumina icon, so it looks like it's not correct. But it's absolutely putting the correct thing into these warehouses. And where it's going to be needed is right here. So instead of sending a huge amount of drones here, we could just make this stuff locally and put the belts in. And thinking about it after the fact, it probably would have made more sense to make this stuff nearby, but we still potentially could. For example, we're not using the space below these machines, which does give us 4 space for belts. That could then be piped in to each one of these. So we could just use this space on the end to make the glass, and then the only thing we would have to worry about is getting the alumina and getting the silicon in. And that's relatively easy. So now we have a build to work on here. And how are the rocket launches going? Well, pretty good, up to 317 total launches, 86 of the structure components, and 7 of the dry docks. So I was worried those dry docks were going to take forever, but it seems like it's working. It's not particularly fast, but it's happening. So we need to have about 24 of these in line on one belt, but also we need to get all 3 of these pipes in here, which is in itself kind of awkward. So I think that does it. Unfortunately, they are just not going to be dense at all, because all of these pipes. That said, I really want them to be. So what about this? Is this any denser? For sure. That certainly does it. So that would be 2 and 4, 10 and 12. So what would this look like right here? Yeah, that's decent, considering it's going to have supporting machines on the bottom. That's about as good as we can expect. We're just going to need a lot of them over here. But looking good, and using substations would probably make this bigger. So as a result, let's put some power poles right here. By putting poles there, it means that the substations won't take up any extra space. And we can't mirror it, but we can put it around here. Smash all the machines in, because the concept is essentially the same here. Well, at the very bottom, we're going to have 4 machines picking up the tin and putting it back into the system. So we can do color by system to try to see what's going on here. It's pretty good. Now we need to have 3 powder mixers per setup, and since we have a space right here, let's just use it. So we have these 3 machines, and they can input into a single induction furnace, which can also go up here wherever is convenient. How about like this for now? And we can also make this more compact if we rotate it around and have the 2 sides have their buildings in the middle, if we can make the belts work, which we totally could, if it was like this. So that would be half of the required setup. The other half would just go wherever. And then this side would be a pretty easy machine in a machine in a machine. And then at the end, we'd have a bunch of them. And we could try to flip them around to share their pipe. So those all look connected. They would pull off the inputs that they could. This would create mud, which could go its own way. And then the outputs would go down there. So I think we have a setup here. Now we just need to put them in place and get it all belted in and hope it works. We need even more bus lanes. And extend the bus basically as far as it's going to go. Guess we'll just go over the road for now. So let's line this up. Give it 2 spaces. And then this supporting component, which can go in the middle, we'll give it also its 2 spaces. And then the second setup making glass, which now does not fit. Although we can do a small modification to this road to make sure that it does. And there's signal wires here, but I'm pretty sure they don't actually do anything. This road has been here a very long time, basically since we conquered the wilderness. And there's very little of this factory that's not artificial at this point. But I suppose it is also kind of weird to have trees on concrete. We still kind of have a little bit of an issue here. I was hoping to do this with the least amount of road being moved. But we still got to move some stuff. And checking on our logistics spots, it looks like we have about 8,000 of them now, so our changes to the logic are certainly helping. Okay, drone path moved again. And let's do another one of these with its 2 spaces. And now it's time to actually get them hooked up here. Because we'd have all 4 of these lanes, glass coming out of each of them. The input belts for this would come in through here. Okay, I think most of this is set up. Right now we are waiting for robots to deliver some tin ingots in here to get this system seated, and it'll take quite a few trips for them to do it, but eventually they'll get it filled up. So now it's time to test. Right now we have 10 drones picking up silicon and picking up alumina, and we'll just have to see if that's enough drones. Certainly we're going to need a lot less than we needed for glass. So first we can hook that in. They get pulled in, but they still need their lime as well, and that comes from this setup here. This will create some carbon dioxide, and it's a sufficiently large quantity of it that sending it by drone isn't really practical. So for now, we'll just vent it. We do have a nitrogen setup here, just creating the nitrogen and venting the oxygen because it's just too much to try to save at this point. And that's fine, really what that carbon dioxide would turn into is just a little bit of plastic in the end. So it's fine. Let's give it its fuel and give it its mud water. Although, I don't have the regular water hooked up, and also we need to get the mud off of these. So there we go. Cranking out the lime. Any mud which makes it down here just goes off to the side to get put into a mud depot and delivered, leaving just the lime here. But it's not all running because this is aligned incorrectly. Let's just put it like this so we can see where it is. There we go. And this one also needs its input. There we go. I think they're all good. So let's hook up this side then and see how it works. That runs, making the glass mixture. The glass mixture is liquefied and put into the machines. And they're starting to run. At least that side. Well, it's certainly trying to go. Now we need to actually connect all of this glass. I disabled the requests for these depots here because we don't really need them. And each one of these is going to need its own belt. And then we'll find what the next limiting factor is, which is probably going to be these circuit boards. But at least for now, we can finally supercharge this setup and hopefully see it run, at least for a little while, at full power. Well, it's certainly going strong, using up 4 solid green belts, which is 300 glass a second, and that's a lot of components getting completely shot into the science setup here. Looks like it's not getting all of the nitrogen that it needs, which that makes sense, because where it's getting it from is probably not scaled for something this big. We did calculate it out already, and in fact, basically this setup right here will do the job that it needs. Seems like it's actually falling behind on its reprocessing of the byproduct, at least specifically this one. And that gets it cleared out. That's a lot of blue science. It's not completely packed on the belt yet, but it's also a huge buffer that has to get filled up. Seems like a lot of these inserters here are just waiting for this belt, so perhaps it would be better if it was faster. We never really got to stress test this before, but it's really starting to look fast now. Let's see, none of this is running anymore, but that's because glass is running out. So why is that? Can't get rid of the ingots. Because every single one of these inserters is the wrong distance. And also that belt needs to be a little longer. Okay, we're back in it again. They don't necessarily have to be fully compressed because our setup only needs 264 out of the 300 that these can make. But yeah, doing pretty good. Of course, now we're going to find ourselves short on these electronic boards. But even though we need more than 1 belt of them, we actually only need 2 in total. And compared to everything else that we need to do, that really would only require 1 belt of each of their items, except for the crazy stuff that would never be on the bus at all. It seems pretty reasonable that we can take up 2 slots for this, especially because we've actually been gaining a few, because we've removed old stuff. Like we have 1 right here we can use, and of course the actual belt right here. And this station even has 1 available slot. And even looks like carbon kind of stopped here. But I think that was going into military science, so we probably want to keep it. And then increase our request for negative 1024 stacks. Which is a lot, but they will get distributed to the correct warehouses and sent along the way. Wow. We're at 32 gigawatts right now because butane, uranium-234, plutonium, and thorium is all running. That's pretty crazy, and in fact only 2.8 gigawatts is actually going into the accumulators. So this is real. That's a lot of power. 17 gigawatts for the labs. That's pretty nuts. Okay, I changed the requests here. And that's actually an issue with the power dropping down, because now both of our thorium setups are running, but it's not enough, which is causing plutonium to have to turn on to help, which is then creating more curium. So that's definitely not what we want to see. So you should probably kind of let this science dwindle down for a second, because we need even more power. And I suppose since we're at this point, we might as well build a new canal here for more pumps. Gotta do this just right, because the water fill is a little weird. There we go. And at least now we can get this thing properly lined up with the new size of reactors, which is right there. We'll keep the water fill going because we got more water. There we go. That's so many requests. But it looks like enough of this is placed, so we can go to the back and get rid of our pipe patch here, because now we can just extend these normally. So all of those zones are going to be in the way. And unfortunately we can't get the whole thing fit in there because of the rails, but we can do most of it. That's so much power we're about to put in here. So, it's so big I can't even like line it up correctly, but I think it's this. Oh, that was some lag. But it looks correct. And yeah, reactors are gonna immediately turn on because it's not all placed yet, and all the power switches were set on, but that's okay. In the end, it's not gonna waste that much power. And now power requirements are so much less because research stopped. It's kind of amazing how quickly that changes. Meanwhile, rocket launches are continuing. It looks like most of the bugs and growing pains of the rocket silos and their equipment has been worked out. We've launched 430 rockets and 189 of the structure components, still waiting on the assembly components, but I imagine that is just a slowdown of solar panels. Well, no, it's fine. It's specifically the robots, which it's waiting on, which is interesting because it has been manufacturing more, and it completely filled the chest. So what isn't working here? We still haven't gotten our brains. Why are we getting such a tiny trickle of transistors? Well, it looks like because we were stealing it from this other setup, and it is certainly belt limited. So let's get this thing cranked up. But there we are. Now they're getting delivered again. So we've got most of the new thorium reactor set up. That is an incredible amount of power right there. We'll have to wait for it to be placed to find out exactly how much. But progress is continuing there. And we probably have enough power to start this up again because we really need to be researching constantly to get this done. So having it be stationary like this is not good. So let's pipe all this stuff in, now coming from the bus, to reduce stress on the drones a little bit. From what I can tell, it's moving. It's kind of a lot going on, and a lot of buffer, so it just takes a long time. This whole thing requires an input of 22 items a second. And for a red belt, does that look like 22 items? It's pretty close. Ultimately, we would like to see the entire belt filled with blue science, but the machines in the beginning are very greedy, so it's going to take a while. And it's making it back to the labs, so research will continue. We'll just have to check on it later. Back here at Rockets, we completed the dry dock structure components at 250, and now we're up to 521 rocket launches. So we can check to see that our logic did work, where this shut down the inserter after we had enough in the network. And we can kind of check our work here by seeing if there are any components left over. There is a dry dock in this one, that one, but not too many. So that seems like about 4 extra components were made, and then it stopped, so that's pretty good. Could have been a lot worse. I guess we'll leave them in the chest for now. If we really need the resources, we can break them down with reverse factory. Now we're going to be launching a lot more satellites. We have fully populated all of our labs with space science, which now leaves us with 141,000 of space science packs waiting and ready to go. But we don't want to pointlessly create science packs if we just have no reason to. More launches. Let's do another logistic zone here. Actually space it one more back. This time, we want to pull the space science out, just so we can see what the number is. Lots of noise right here. And we'll do a decider combinator. So we'll say if we have less than 2 million science packs, you can output a satellite. And that's what this is already doing, so by replacing it with this, we now have logic, and it's still being applied. So now we don't have to stare at it just to make sure that we're not creating too much science. But if we ever actually acquire what we need, then we'll stop launching rockets. And of course, if we get to that point, then we can do repeatable research, since at that point we have a huge buffer. But it looks like the rockets have kind of balanced themselves out, because we're getting constant launches now. And this thing is still going. Now that we fixed the robots, it is now waiting on solar panels, and we worked through all of those logistics robots, so now we have a huge amount of them again. So now we just kind of gotta let that complete before we get to the next stage. Now our attention is on our blue science, and it's getting faster, for sure. And 45.3 gigawatts. I shouldn't be surprised. Every time we look at the electric network, suddenly there's a new record again. That's pretty obscene. But looks like our whole setup is done, and of course it's running. So what does it do? In total, 32.6 gigawatts, and I guess the rest of those gigawatts are just coming from other sources. Luckily, it looks like the naphtha and the fuel oil from the existing build is holding up, so we don't have to mess with it. And as always, lots and lots of requests. But it's too much to really look at to see if everything is working, because the limiting factor is all of these copper plate machines. So what we would expect is every copper plate machine, more or less, is running. Like this one isn't, but it's because these are full, so why isn't this side going? Ah, this inserter is on the wrong side. Well, that was a big performance reduction. Let's make sure the rest of these are good. See, those two sides are good. That side is good. Those two are good. And this one's messed up, so actually that was a big find. That significantly neutered the setup. So let's see what happens now. Well, certainly it helped because the belt is full. We're constantly finding little issues, but that's kind of what you have to do, is run it at full blast and then find what the issue is. And then once you fix it, whatever the next issue is will expose itself. And you keep doing that until your output is what you would expect. And in this situation, we expect it to be full. Checked it again. 48.2 gigawatts. Well, there we go. We're seeing a mostly full belt of blue science. So I think we have been successful at figuring out what all the problems were. Probably should attempt to combine these like we did with the other sciences and put some balancers in here just in case it matters. Well, we're certainly getting it filled now. Fantastic. Pretty much every one of our labs should be more or less seated. And that's just about what's happening. But we'll know we've made it when the packs are kind of moving abruptly like this. It's really hard to tell when the belts are this fast, but you can see how the green and the red are kind of stopping and going sometimes, whereas the blue is just constantly going. So we've got to let the blue run until it's filled up everything, and then once it has, we can expand our labs again. Because currently we have 47 items a second of consumption, and that is not enough. We need even more. Luckily, our power upgrades seem to have worked. We have enough power for everything we need to do, at least right now until we add more labs again. Thorium and plutonium are essentially infinitely scalable. You can add as many as you want, because each stage higher you go, the more self-sustaining they become. Whereas doing uranium is kind of a raw resource kind of thing. Once you're doing plutonium and thorium, really the limiting factor is just how much fuel you make. The input resources isn't an issue anymore. And concrete placed. And so many requests just constantly. Up to 2.3 terajoules, but I think we can definitely use more because it's certainly charging the accumulators quickly. And we do have some space here. We could essentially take it all the way down to here, and hopefully the biters won't be able to reach us. And now we're up to 49 gigawatts. Are we going to see 50? There we go, 50 gigawatts. Not that that was a goal or anything, but we've hit it. Is there a betting pool to seeing 100 gigawatts for this factory? Because I'm kind of feeling like we might hit it. I'm kind of thinking we still don't have enough power because the plutonium reactors keep having to turn on at 15%, which is thus building up curium. So, I think we still need more power. We can build another line of them up here, and we can also kind of extend out this way that we're getting very close to biter territory out there. There's a lot of them, but we still can extend it. So how about we try to even up the base by extending it from this point all the way up there, which is going to be a lot of landfill. But it's also not an issue because making landfill makes salt. So because of that, I really don't mind doing this at all. Uh-oh, the accumulators are down to 7% here. That's not good. Well, we're just about done with the assembly components here. We have 49 of them, and the logic has shut off the inserter. So that means the last ones are stuck in a few chests here, but hopefully there's not too many of them. It looks like there's one right there, and that's the one. So we didn't make any extras this time. Probably because the production rate was a lot slower. Lots of launches happening here, but we're just about ready to send up the last assembly component. There it goes. And now we've unlocked the primary construction. Congratulations, pat yourself on the back. Dry dock done. We just need to build the ship. It's starting to feel like the base that builds the base. Yes, it does. So now we need to put the rest of it up. The numbers are a lot smaller, so as far as putting rockets up, it'll be a lot easier. We just need lots of thrusters and hull components. The thing that's hard is actually making those components because a lot of them are quite expensive. But right now we can't make any more components because we actually have to research them. And because we have supercharged our blue science, it doesn't really make much sense to research something else here because we're ultimately going to be limited by these two other packs. So we would be wasting all of the expansion that we did to the first three by doing that. So it doesn't make sense to change our research. However, if we were to upgrade our purple and pink science and supercharge those as well, it wouldn't really be wasting any time to switch off of the faster than light theory to research some more spaceship components. So it looks like that's our next step, but that's gonna have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.